Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm David with Agricultural Economic Insights, joining you for another edition of Chart of the Week, where we step back and highlight a few charts that we've been emphasizing and articles we've written and share a little bit of a behind the scenes conversation about what we were thinking about and what we were observing as we were putting these articles together. This week, we're returning to this acres.com data that we've been able to use as part of a partnership where we're trying to understand farmland sales activities and trends throughout the Midwest. And so we had an earlier article looking at overall activity, sort of an annual measure of activity, but this time we're looking at cumulative activity from that period 2018 to 2024. So there are ups and downs and trends, but we want to see how that activity was shaping up as we rolled across several years of activity. So there's some interesting county level implications, but we're going to start with state level activities. Again, this is looking at how many farms were sold, share of farmland acres sold as a percentage of all the farmland in this particular case state, but also later in county. So across the whole region, about 12% of all the farmland in this Midwest region was sold between 2018 and 2024. In Iowa, it was considerably less, about 5.4%. Illinois and Indiana were closer to the average, about 10%. So about twice as much land turned over on a relative basis in Indiana, Illinois than in Iowa. And then if you look at Minnesota and Ohio, they saw even more turnover. I'm going to add a little asterisk here. We didn't confirm the data here about what farmland is or isn't. This is determined, at the state level. But the idea here is we've looked at all the land that has been categorized as farmland and all the sales that are categorized as farmland. It's entirely possible that what we think of as farmland, if you're in maybe Iowa where it's a lot of corn and soybean acres, would be the composition of that would be maybe different than in, say, Minnesota or Ohio, especially in different parts of those states where it could be a larger share that's pasture or hayland or maybe even timberland. So what sizes up as farmland is going to vary a little bit as we move across the countries. But let's take a look at this at a county level. Yellow is the smallest category. So let's start in Iowa. So the yellow shading means less than 5% of that county's farmland acres were sold during that 2018 to 2024 period. That's sort of the most common color we see across Ohio. But excuse me, the most common color we see across Iowa. But when we look at these county level differences, we see that it is higher in a few cases. So there's the next shade of color is green, 5 to 10% of farmland sold over that period of time, and then the next category up is 10 to 15%. So there are a few counties where you might not saw a lot of activity in your county, but the county right next door had a lot of activity, or maybe you're in an area such as North and West Iowa where there just wasn't a lot of sales over the last several handful of years. But if you're in Northeast Iowa, you saw a lot more activities. The takeaway here is how common, how many opportunities do you have to maybe buy that neighbor farm? It could vary by geography. Again, I think it's a little more interesting to look at the differences within the state. So in Minnesota, you see more sales in the east than in the west. Similar with Ohio, more of land categorized as farmland sold in the west and southwest than we saw in the east. Take a look at Indiana and Illinois. Again, there are even differences in these states where they were closer to that Midwest average of 10%, but there are a few counties that had less than 5% of the farmland sold, and in some cases, counties with more than 15% of the farmland sold. So, and those differences may not be all that much, all that far away in terms of miles or as the crow would fly. So, again, to summarize, a lot of differences unfold when we look at farmland sales activity on an annual basis, but also cumulatively over a 5, 6, 7 year period. So that can give a little bit of perception of how much land is on the market or how many opportunities you have to buy maybe that neighbor farmer to expand your operation through farmland purchases. That's all we have for this week. Until next time, stay curious.